Welcome, friends. This is Pastor Bob, and it's time for our midweek message. And this week, we're going to continue learning about the Bible. Now, this week, we're going to talk about everything after the book of Acts, namely the Epistles and the book of Revelation. And then next week, we'll get into the Old Testament. The Old Testament takes a little bit more time just because there are so many different types of literature written over a much longer time frame. So, anyway, this week, we're going to talk mostly about the epistles. And I actually was going to wear a funny shirt I have. And the shirt kind of goes like this: Greetings, I give thanks for you. Hold steadfast in your faith. Stop being stupid. Timothy says hi. And at first, that shirt seems kind of mean. But what it is it's an outline of most of the epistles, especially Paul's epistles. The shirt is meant to mimic one of Paul's letters. And it does follow the basic format. See, what the epistles were is they were letters written to the churches at the time. And most of the letters were considered transferable. Namely, they could be used in multiple churches. And the early churches did just that. They would take the letter, it would go to a church, it would be read as part of worship on Sunday, and distributed as much as could be, at least the information. And then the letter would be copied and then sent to another church. And so by the course of a year, these letters may have gone to 20 or 30 different churches, depending on how far they were and when they were used. Now, some letters are not considered what are called Catholic or universal letters. Some were written to specific people or specific churches. But even those, the thought behind it was, is if this church is having this problem, then maybe the other ones are as well. And so all churches could be uplifted by this letter. So the letters would all follow almost all of them would follow a genuine format. First, they would start with a greeting with Paul or whoever the author is giving thanks for all the good a particular church is doing. And they would highlight some of the good things that that church was doing. Then in the body, you'll notice a couple things going on. You'll notice Paul's instructions. Paul would be giving instructions for particular situations or how to handle certain things. And then there would also be correction. That's where the quit being stupid part comes from my funny t-shirt, because he's addressing problems in a local church. And it's kind of funny because I'll meet people who used to go to church, and they will say to me, Pastor Bob, I used to go to this church, but then we had this problem. And they're a little upset because we all imagine church being this place of perfect peace and perfect harmony. And I think every good church strives for that. But the reality is, whenever you get people together, you're going to have problems. Matter of fact, the Rick Warren says the only perfect church is on Mars, because that's the only church that doesn't have people. And so what Paul is doing is he's addressing problems in the early church, because they had problems too, just like we do today. Some of them are pretty major. If you've read some of the letters, you've seen some of the things that must be going on. It's funny, whenever I read Paul's letters and whenever Paul makes a statement or makes a correction, I always ask in the back of my mind, why is he saying that? What's he addressing here? Did he get a question from a church that he's answering? Is he addressing a situation that happened here that he has to put his foot down? And it's funny, when you read Paul's letters, especially in the Greek, American translators really soften them, we'll say. A lot of political correctness, because when Paul corrects, the gloves come off. He's not gentle. The greeting is gentle and loving. The postscript at the end is gentle and loving, but his correction is done with authority, sometimes to the point of being very uncomfortable to the modern, sensitive American ear. Today's Christian churches, we have this idea of a pastor being this like soft, almost feminine, gentle, at peace, kind of esoteric, kind of lofty kind of person. That's not the biblical version of a pastor. In the ancient world, pastors had authority. They laid down the law, so to speak, and Paul does just that. And sometimes you can read it and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe he said that. But Paul does do some pretty firm corrections. He does it in love, don't get me wrong. He tells the churches all the great they're doing. He even talks about different prescriptions when they should be used. He'll say in some instances, this is my rule for all of the churches, putting his foot down. And then other times he'll say, I do not speak this from the authority of God, but from my own personal experience. And so there's different measures of authority and accountability there, but it's definitely there. So if you get a chance, read those. That would be a good homework for this week. There's not that many of them, and none of them are very long. Romans is pretty deep. Hebrews is pretty deep, but you could probably read them all in an afternoon. Or if you took a couple every night, you could read them over the course of just a little bit more than a week. But just pay attention. When Paul, once you get past that initial introduction where he's saying, hello, how wonderful you are, when he starts giving instruction, ask him, why is he saying that? Now, in Romans and in Hebrews, he also has big sections of explanation. Like in Romans, that's kind of the pinnacle of all of Paul's writings. He explains the whole plan of God's salvation. So you can ask, why did he write that? Well, probably because this church was trying to understand the context of Jesus and the wider plan of salvation, namely found in the Old Testament. And so Paul's explaining that. So always ask why Paul is writing that. Why is he addressing this issue? And look out for some of his firmer, sterner sayings, because when you pay attention to those, you're like, oh my gosh, you can't believe he said that. Anyway, let's move on to Revelation. Revelation, I think the best way for me to explain Revelation is to tell you a story. My bachelor's degree, one of the degrees is in systematic theology. And I was a layperson at my home church, Church of St. Andrew United Methodist in Toledo. And a guy comes up to me and he says, hey, you're at school, you're studying, you probably read this stuff every day. Why don't you do a Bible study on the book of Revelation? And being young, I said, sure, yes, awesome, great idea. And so I got all of the different perspectives of Revelation, and I was going to write my own Bible study. I didn't want to use these prepackaged simple ones you get at the local bookstore. They kind of hold your hand through it, because this was a book that's very complicated. And so what I learned is that if you look at all of the major Christian bodies and all of the major scholars, nobody really agrees on what Revelation is or what it means. And I'm just being honest with you. And don't feel bad. It was the same in the early church. They almost left Revelation out of the canon because they knew it had apostolic origins, but they couldn't see how it fit. Some people thought it needs to go in. This is a very important letter. Other people said, yeah, but we don't really quite know what it means. A lot of symbolism, a lot of imagery, a lot of metaphor. How do we apply this? How is it to be used by a local church? And so it did make it in. And so today we study it. If I could, I'll break it down into two major camps. Now, there's certainly a lot more. There's premillennialist and postmillennialist and all these different things. But there's two major camps. The first camp, if you were to go to any major academic institution, what they will tell you Revelation is, it is a letter written by John, who was exiled to the island of Patmos, written for people at that time. And the symbolism and the imagery was code words to explain what was happening in the Roman Empire at that time. And so you might ask, why did they need to use code words? Well, Christians were already being persecuted. They were already in trouble. To write something critical of the Roman Empire, if it were to be intercepted, it could get John in even more trouble. So he wrote everything in code with symbols and imagery and, the Whore of Babylon and the seven-headed dragon and the seven crowns and the seven lampstands. And, there's a lot of symbols and numerology and stuff that probably would have been understood by the early reader, but today we don't quite understand. Now, those that hold to that view also believe that towards the end of Revelation, when it's talking about the new heaven, new earth, that that is referring to the future, but the bulk of the letter was written for people at that time, explaining what was happening at that time and to offer encouragement and hope. And then at the end, it points towards the future. The second view, which branches off into 10 or 12 other views that nobody can quite agree on is that the whole letter is in reference to a future event, namely the end of the world. And they draw on Daniel, the mini apocalypse in the Gospels, and other apocalyptic, that's the actual term for it, apocalyptic literature found within the Bible, and use it to help interpret the apocalyptic literature found in Revelation and to point to current or future events. And the hard part with this, though, if you read history, if you look at every century going all the way back, there have always been people who said, now the end of the world is coming. So if you were alive in the 3rd century and you're walking around Rome or wherever, there's going to be some people saying, look, it's the end of the world. And what they'll do is they'll use the ambiguous imagery and symbolism in Revelation and say, look, see, these are signs of the times, wars and rumors of wars, like found in Matthew. That's what's going on now. That's what's described in Revelation. If you were in the 5th century, you'd have another group of people. Every century, there has been a group of people who have tried to tie the imagery in Revelation to current events, saying the future is here now, the end is near. The problem with that is a guy comes up to Jesus during what's called the mini apocalypse in the Gospels, and he says, how will we know when these things are going to happen? And Jesus says, nobody knows the time or the hour, not even the Son, only the Father in heaven. So we don't know. We can try to tie it to current events, but the reality is nobody knows. Nobody can know. Only God knows. So at best, what people are doing with that imagery is a guess. When I was a new Christian, the Left Behind books started getting popular, and I read a lot of stuff from Philip Jenkins and Timothy LaHaye, who both have adopted this futuristic view of Revelation. And I saw some other things like David Jeremiah was an older gentleman. I forget his name, but some other, and they all held this view that the end of the world is now. It can be even tomorrow, and they would argue using the different imagery in Revelation and then tie the imagery to something happening, which is actually really easy to do. Like when John refers to the locusts with tails of fire. Someone could say, locusts with tails of fire. Oh, that must be an F-16, because to John, an F-16 would look like an insect, and the tail of fire would have been what's coming out of the back of the turbine. You know, you can take the imagery and tie it to just about anything. But that's what they do. They'll take it and tie the imagery to current events, to current things that are happening, Gog and Magog, the bear and the eagle, you know, all that kind of stuff. Battle at the Valley of Megiddo. You can tie all that to anything, and what they do is they try and package it. And who knows? I mean, maybe. I mean, eventually somebody's going to be right. They're going to predict it's coming soon, and it does come soon. So eventually, at some point, somebody's going to be right. But so far, for the last 2,000 years, nobody's been right. A lot of people have tried to predict it. All of them are wrong. So what is their success rate? 0. So anyway, the way to look at it is up to you. I don't know that me personally, maybe it is talking about the future. If it is, it's going to be kind of hard to discern the when and the how. Is it talking about events at the time? Maybe. Maybe it's a mixture of both. Revelation is one of those mysterious letters that, as far as opinions go, and I'm not talking about just the average person's opinions, I'm talking about opinions of scholars, people who are informed and have taken in the data. You can talk to multiple scholars and get multiple different opinions as to what the letter is, how it should be read, and what it means for us today. I'd encourage you to read it. I like it because there is a bit of mystery. It's kind of fun to read. I like to imagine God coming again and establishing the new kingdom. Matter of fact, I look forward to it. That's why I'm a Christian. I want to be in heaven. I want to be part of this new kingdom. Um, I think it's something that we all wrestle with, the end coming. And so, as far as reading it and enjoying it, definitely do. Can you be uplifted by it? I think so. There is hope. The main point of the letter is no matter what happens, God wins. That's hopeful. But be careful in jumping on a bandwagon with somebody that claims they know when it's going to happen, because Jesus himself, as a warning to all of us who think we know, you don't know. Only the Father in heaven knows. So always just keep that in the back of your mind. Anyway, so that's the epistles and Revelation. I encourage you to read those this week. Next week, we're going to jump in the Old Testament and talk about those books. The Old Testament, that's a deep dive, brothers. I mean, that's brothers and sisters. That's a deep dive because you got multiple different literature, multiple different authors. We're going to try and unpack that and hopefully come away with a little bit better understanding. In the meantime, I will see you guys on Sunday. Thanks.